Well, hi, folks. Welcome to my new series on prepping for the end times. These are my usual disclaimers. I can't believe that in this day and age I have to say this, but I am not a doctor. I am not a financial advisor. I am not an authority figure of any kind. I expect you to do your own research and come to your own conclusions. I have been off grid in the woods for coming up on 8 years now. And I have been living well under poverty level throughout this entire time. I come from the city, so things weren't always that way, but I have had to use all my prepping skills to survive out here. And the things that I have done to survive out here without money just so happen to be the same things folks need to do to survive an economic collapse or a disaster. It's the same skill set. So I hope that I can help anybody out with what I've had to learn and how I've had to live. So these are my ideas, and this is my version of prepping. This video is about preps and things that you can collect and things that you can do that are, I think, very overlooked and not talked about. And I think that you have to live the life to come across some of these things. These prepping ideas that I'm going to give you are things of all different budgets. If you have money to go to the store and buy things, there's things you can go get. But if you don't have any money, I can help you reuse what you already buy, and there are many things that you can do right now that don't require money. So this is for all different budgets. I can't stand sitting around broke watching prepping videos of, look at my grocery store haul. It doesn't help. What can I do with what I have? And that's another thing people have to learn, is how to make do with what they have. So these are the things that I prep and the things that I have that are for barter or that I don't hear discussed a lot. I'm going to be talking about kitchen items first, and then I will get into all sorts of different household items that could be good for entertainment, good for barter. So stick around, and you might want a pen and paper, make a list. Here we go.
Another good idea, if you have the funds to do so, is to stock up on manual off-grid cooking supplies. And here are some pictures of the things that I've stocked up on. Down here at the bottom right, I have a manual grain mill. For those that might need baby food, you can take whatever you're eating and grind it up there. If you don't have electricity and don't have a blender. Your manual egg beaters, just your typical stuff. Here, this red thing that you see here is a hand grain mill, and I have one of these. It's called a Wonder Mill Junior. It has steel as well as stone pieces, so you want to use the stone for things like wheat, but you'd want to use the steel. And I can grind up coffee beans to make coffee. I can grind up nuts to make nut butters, things like that. So a handheld grain mill is a really good idea, and it'll give you a good amount of exercise too. It takes some elbow grease. And then to the left there is a pasta maker. It's unbelievable how easy it is to make pasta, especially if you have a pasta maker. The ingredients, more than likely, you already have in your kitchen. Another reason I got a pasta maker is because I'm growing tobacco, and I can use a pasta maker to shred my tobacco leaves. Another thing you might want to stock up on is empty jars. So I've already mentioned stocking up on old t-shirts and old cotton fabrics. I've mentioned stocking up on old plastic water bottles and things like that. Well, another thing you may want to save are any kind of glass jars. You can use them to store herbs, which is what I'm doing here. All these little jars you see are old preserves jars that I got at the dollar store. Again, it doesn't cost that much. So you can actually turn your budget that you buy food into your preps as well. So for me, I'll actually spend an extra $1 or so on something that's a little more expensive if it has a container that I can reuse. It's dual function and it's worth it. So I use reusable jars and things like that to store my herbs in. Another thing people don't think about a lot is yeast. If you might end up having to make your own bread, you're going to need yeast. So here I'm showing bread yeast, but I'm also showing champagne yeast, which I'll get to in a minute. Here are some items for barter and for morale that you might want to consider. And please do not underestimate the importance of morale in a survival situation. Don't underestimate it at all. There was, back when the concentration camps in Germany were being liberated, there was accidentally a shipment of lipstick that was sent to a women's area in the concentration camp. It was unbelievable how happy and probably how many lives that lipstick saved. Because no, you can't eat lipstick, but the morale of having a normal thing, something that reminded them of normal everyday life. It was unbelievable how happy an item like that made those women. So do not ever underestimate the power and the survival importance of morale items, especially booze. This is why I've stocked up on champagne yeast. Now you can actually make wine without any yeast. You can make a fruit starter. And so you can look up videos on YouTube or do a web search on how to make a fruit starter or a yeast starter. But you can make yeast starters to make bread and wine without regular yeast. So don't think you absolutely have to have it. But if you have it, especially champagne yeast is chosen because after the alcohol content of wine gets to a certain point, that alcohol will kill the yeast. So if you want to have stronger wine, it's better that you have a yeast that will handle the higher alcohol content. And champagne and wine yeasts are designed to handle a higher alcohol content. And I can't quite tell you how strong the wines that I make are, but boy, yeah, they work. They definitely work. And being able to make wine not only is good for morale, it's something you can barter. Another thing you might want to consider is growing tobacco or stocking up on loose tobacco. Tobacco can be used as an insecticide. It actually does have medicinal uses. But another thing about barter items is people will swap food and water and absolute necessity for morale items like alcohol, like tobacco, things like that. So don't underestimate the power of tobacco and the power of having barter items. Another thing you might want to consider stocking up on is entertainment. You may not be able to watch TV, and if you don't have a TV and that's all you're used to doing, what are you going to do to keep yourself busy? Well, I strongly suggest you start accumulating what you need to have some hobbies that could keep you busy, that also might be productive, and have the supplies for those. So you can also make things to barter with. So for me, I have not learned how to crochet yet, but I have stocked up on crochet hooks, I've stocked up on knitting needles, and I've stocked up on yarn and things like that. So that way I will have something to do if I have no power and no ability to watch TV or anything like that. I have something else I can do. So consider hobby supplies in your preps. Other things to stock up on you might not have thought of. Zippos. Zippos, lighter fluid, wicks, and flints. I stocked up on all of that back when I had money, because I know this stuff isn't cheap, folks. But these things would be good barter items. If somebody has a Zippo and they don't have a flint or they need a new wick, it might be a good thing to barter. So that's one thing that you might want to consider, is stocking up on some Zippos, some flints, and some wicks, and some lighter fluid. Get yourself a nice little collection and stash it off somewhere. I haven't heard very many people mention sternos. or handheld drills. And this handheld drill right here, this thing was not easy to find. I had to find it online. So having just your old-fashioned handheld drill and handheld tools might be something to consider, because there could come a point where you're not going to be able to recharge your battery operated stuff. Another thing that I stocked up on, and you can get them at the dollar store, are these little Sterno heat cans. And one of those can warm me up some food or make me some coffee. When I first moved out here and didn't have power, I used these little Sterno things every day to make my morning coffee. So Sterno stoves and Sterno fuel might be another thing to consider stocking up on. And I've put the lid of a can in the bottom of this Sterno stove to help keep it stable, and that tend to work well. So OffGrid Tools, Sterno is another thing to think of. Paper, notebooks, pens, pencils, crayons, paints, okay? That's another thing that I don't think any other prepper has talked about. I stocked up when I heard that the dollar stores were going to be raising their prices. One of the things I bought a lot of are these composition notebooks. But being able to keep a journal or to write or to make lists or send notes, things like that, to give yourself something to do when you're off grid can be precious. Also, having enough pens and pencils, crayons for the kids to draw with. Consider activity books, decks of cards, which I don't have pictured here, but buying a few decks of cards. Things like that to have yourself some off-grid entertainment. Board games, instruments, things like that. So we need to go back to old school, which means pen and paper. So consider stocking up on notebook paper, sketchbooks, things like that to help give you something to do, or give the kids something to do if you don't have power and you're stuck off grid.
Thank you for your time. I hope you guys take care of yourselves, your family, get prepared. Godspeed, folks. Y'all come back now, you hear? Bye.